Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this Tuesday afternoon. And I got held up in a meeting once again. We were talking about football, primarily about how the New York the New York Jets recently acquired Davante Adams in a trade. If you guys want to hear a little bit more about that, we do have a football podcast that went live directly before my podcast. So if any of you guys are interested in that, I recommend tuning into that podcast to hear their thoughts. And we also have several other football podcasts. We have a sports podcast that's coming up directly after my basketball segment and my basketball podcast. So if any of you guys are interested in hearing about the Davante Adams trade and the overall thoughts that some of our hosts have, I recommend tuning into those. But we are here to talk about basketball, and we have a lot of news. We have a lot of stuff to talk about. So, for one, Paul George has suffered a hyperextended knee injury, and we are going to talk about that in this first segment because this happened in a preseason game, and, just going to give my overall thoughts on this. And then in the second segment, we're going to talk about De'Aaron Fox declining a $165 million contract extension and what that means for the Kings, whether or not it's a bad thing or whether or not it's a good thing or anything of that nature. And then in the third segment, we are going to talk about the Lakers possibly pursuing a trade. Yes, the Lakers are actually trying to make a move before the season starts. It's very surprising, and we're going to go ahead and talk about that in the third segment. And then in the fourth segment, we're going to do our recap of the preseason matchups and see how that goes, see how long that goes on. And then in the fifth segment, we have a special fifth segment, so be sure to stay tuned for that. I'm going to be covering multiple things in that fifth segment, so I recommend tuning in if you guys are interested. Before I begin, I do like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, something that you've just been dying to share. We are all ears. If you really want your comment or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. If Super Chat's not really your thing, then that's okay. You can always use the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment as well. The link is gsmcspodcast.net. You can see it popping up real soon. And then you can send in your comments and donations that way as well. And any of your comments that you do via Super Chat or the link will be featured on the next show. So if you guys want incentive on donating or sending a comment that you really want to be heard, that's the way you do it. So now we're going to go ahead and dive right into this first segment. So Paul George, he has suffered a hyperextended knee. Now, he was when he was playing defense, he was in a very, very awkward position, and he landed rather funny trying to adjust himself on the defense. I wish I could show the picture, but the picture is honestly a little bit weird, and I didn't really want to put that on this graphic. But yeah, Paul George is out. I have no idea for how long he's going to be out, but I've been saying this since the jump. I don't know why teams decide to play their starters, especially their starters who have a history of being injured. This isn't the first time that Paul George has suffered an injury, and in fact, he's suffered numerous injuries over the span of his career. And with his time on the Clippers, a lot of it was cut short due to these injuries. And the same problem happened with Kawhi Leonard. And really, I have a problem with load managing, yes, but that is only a problem during the regular season. For the most part, I'm actually, I think load managing is a very smart strategy and something that a lot of players should do. It's just when you abuse it is when I have a problem. But doing it in the preseason, I think, is necessary for a lot of these players. And I just don't understand why the 76ers even bothered with playing him in the preseason game. Because look at what happens now. Look at what happened. Now you just lost one of your best players and the season is about to start. It's obviously not going to start this week or towards the end of this week, but it's about to start real soon. And the fact that now they're probably not going to enter the season with Paul George, it's a little bit concerning now. And not to mention the fact that these ankle injuries or these leg injuries that he tends to suffer, it's also rather concerning. You need Paul George healthy, and You need Joel Embiid healthy as well. So the fact that the 76ers even wanted to play Paul George in this game, I'm just constantly questioning, because we know Paul George's injury history. We know he's not the most healthy player, and we also know he's not the youngest player either. He's 34 years old, I believe. And this is just not ideal. This is really not ideal. Now, the Sixers, they ended up winning comfortably in this game. So I guess, you could take that however you will and take it with a grain of salt. I mean, 76ers, they won comfortably 104-89, partly in due to Trae Young and all of his turnovers in the 27 minutes that he played. But aside from that, I mean, this is really bad news, and this is going to be the one thing that this game is going to be remembered, the game where Paul George got hurt. And it doesn't matter the results of this game. And, Maxey, he was playing as well, and he played 26 minutes in this game. Stop playing your starters in preseason games. These games don't matter. Like, we say not we say, but a lot of the NBA analytics and all of those people that make the numbers and whatever you want to call them, it's like, the regular season, at least to them, it doesn't matter all that much. And to some players, the regular season doesn't matter all that much. I don't agree with that, because, I think the regular season is, it's more important than a lot of people like to make it out to be. But a preseason, those are the games that don't really matter as much. Those are the games that don't matter. And because they don't matter, why are you playing your starters? It goes right back to that point. It should not happen. Like, these sort of games should not be, these sort of injuries should not happen. There's no reason why Maxey should be playing 26 minutes in a preseason game. Now, 15 minutes, I guess, that makes a little bit more sense. 10 minutes, yes, that makes total sense. And in fact, 0 minutes is how I would go with it. If I was a coach, or if I was in the position that the 76ers are in, every single starter and important player that the 76ers need is not going to play in this game. Any player that has been on the team last season that was in the rotation, they could get some minutes, but the reality is that the preseason should be a time where you test and see what your roster can do. And I understand, playing the starters for that, but they should not be playing more than 10 minutes, in my opinion. You could put the starters in and see how they mesh for like a good 5 minutes, or maybe even like a good 7 minutes, and then that's it. But really, this should not have been a problem. And it's kind of ironic how I talked about Paul George yesterday, and I was saying that him and Joel Embiid are going to be under the most pressure for this season because they have everything lined up for them to win. Now, what they need to do is not only do it, but also get past the bugaboo of staying healthy. Joel Embiid has not played in the playoffs healthy at all in his career, aside from that one 4-game series in the bubble where he got swept by the Boston Celtics. And again, this is just a thing. This is just a problem with the 76ers and their injuries, specifically with Joel Embiid. And now a player that they just acquired in free agency that's getting paid a boatload of cash just got injured. And this just doesn't help the team at all. Now, I understand, it's early in the preseason, and chances are they're going to have Paul George back in in the regular season, and they're going to have him back for enough games to continue playing in the regular season. So that's not really the concern, but the concern that I have is just being able to stay healthy throughout the rest of the season, because we already saw that, he got hurt in a preseason game. So what's going to happen in the regular season? How do we know he's not going to get hurt then? How do we know that he's going to be able to maintain his health throughout the long throughout the long regular season that these guys have? Not to mention the play-in tournament adding a couple of games to that as well. So it doesn't really look good for Paul George, and it's just not a good look at all, especially considering his injury history and how often he's been injured in crucial moments. And it's really just like, it's bad. It's just not ideal and not a good way to cap off the preseason if you are a Sixers fan. Granted, you still have a rather solid roster, having Joel Embiid and having Tyrese Maxey in the lineup as well as some of the other role players that the team has. Eric Gordon, he can go on a bit of a run sometimes. Maybe he's a little bit old for that, but however, he can go on a run. I've seen him drop a surprise 50 points before, and nobody expected that. And they have several other players off the bench. Again, they have a very solid team. It's just now they got to stay healthy and they got to win it all. Like, this is the make or break, in my opinion. And it's really like, I get it, trust the process, so like maybe I am overthinking it a little bit, but again, this process has been going on since Joel Embiid was drafted, which was, I believe, since 2017, or maybe even earlier than that, 2016. He was injured for the first year. Of course he was injured for the first year, and he was unable to play in that first year of his rookie year. But this is sort of just the same thing. And this was a problem with Paul George on the Clippers. This was a problem with Paul George on Indiana and his first stint with Team USA as well, when he did suffer that horrible leg injury. Oh my Lord, that was just, looking at that injury just gives me chills, and thinking of that injury just gives me chills now that I'm thinking about it. It was a tough way to go down, but his legs aren't really the best, and he's only getting older. So I feel like this could be a problem that it's not a problem now, but it could stem into a bigger problem as the regular season continues. So those are my main concerns with this injury. In conclusion, I guess you could say. So that's all that I have for the first segment. Again, prayers up for Paul George. Hopefully he can recover pretty quickly for the 76ers. Otherwise, the city might go down in flames. But aside from that, we're going to go ahead and go into the second segment, and we'll talk about why De'Aaron Fox did not accept a $165 million contract extension that was offered to him by the Kings, and what that could mean for the Kings going into the future. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we're going to talk about why De'Aaron Fox has declined a $165 million extension with the Kings, and what this could mean for the Kings going into the future. And before I begin, I do like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, something that you've just been dying to share. We are all ears, and if you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. Just click on the $sign below the chat box, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way, and they really help the show. And if Super Chat's not really your thing, then that's totally fine. You can always use the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or, it really helps the show, and either or, it makes the show much more interactive, and it just really helps. It would be greatly appreciated if you guys could do so. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about this De'Aaron Fox debacle, I guess you could say. So De'Aaron Fox, a lot of the Kings apparently knew that De'Aaron Fox was going to, it was unlikely that De'Aaron Fox was going to sign this extension for this offseason. All the way back in June, The Athletic actually reported that Fox wanted to see how the Kings managed their roster over the summer before making a commitment to the Kings. And I mean, I feel like they've managed their roster, decently. They did acquire DeMar DeRozan, but again, I don't really think DeMar DeRozan brings that much of an impact and changes much with the Kings. I feel like the team, having De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis already, those two guys tend to be much more dominant inside the arc than they are from outside of the arc. And relying on Sabonis primarily relies heavily on the mid-range shot. And while I don't think it's a bad shot necessarily, it is, however, an inefficient shot and something that teams try to stem away from now, given how the game is played, and they try to go for three-pointers a little bit more as opposed to mid-ranges. This is why the era in the 2010s, a lot of people and a lot of players decided to take a bunch of mid-ranges and things like that. But the game sort of evolved, and one could make the argument that it started with Steph, but the reality is that it started with the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs, when they had the Spurs dynasty, they had a lot of corner three-point shooters, and they were utilizing the three-point shot a little bit more than your average NBA team at the time. And then came Steph Curry, where a bunch of teams eventually started to catch on to the strategy and were like, man, we should start shooting a little bit more threes. And that's why everybody is shooting more threes now. And so having DeMar DeRozan does not improve your three-point shooting in the slightest. And I feel like three-point shooting is something that you need. It's definitely a much better shot to take as opposed to a mid-range shot, because when you take a mid-range, obviously, it's still the exact same amount of points as a layup, but you're just farther from the basket. And it's like a high risk, low reward, kind of shot compared to the three-point shot, where it's a high risk, high reward kind of shot, which is why a bunch of teams sort of deviated from that. So aside from, the roster construction, again, I said it was rather decent that they acquired DeMar. Decent, but that doesn't mean it was great or fantastic or completely changes the identity of the Kings, in my opinion. And on Monday, Shams actually confirmed that Fox's plan was not to sign an extension, though the roster had little to do with it, according to Shams. And he reported that Fox has been engaged with the Kings over the past few years and was involved in the decision to add DeMar DeRozan. And the motivations for Fox were reportedly more financial. He was eligible to add $165 million and 3 years to his current rookie max contract this offseason by waiting a year. He opens at least one more lucrative door, or even perhaps two, at least according to this article. No matter what, Fox is going to be eligible for a $229 million extension next offseason. By waiting this extra season, he becomes eligible to get that extra year because he'd have one fewer year left on his existing contract. So the reason why he did not take this contract was because he's waiting to get a little bit more money from the Kings. So Kings fans should not really be worried about it all too much. And I will say, however, this move is most likely going to put them a little bit closer to the second apron or even the first apron if they're not careful, which is another reason why Jalen Brunson actually took a pay cut, which was very surprising from Brunson, trying to keep the roster together and trying to keep the team in contention. So I guess there might be some Kings fans that are questioning, why doesn't De'Aaron Fox take the pay cut? But obviously, De'Aaron Fox, he wants that dough, and he's got a good enough team to be able to not only make the dough, but also possibly increase their chances of winning. So I don't really see a problem with this. I don't see a problem with athletes trying to chase the money. This is half of the reason why they play for the most part. And so again, waiting this extra season is just going to, remove a year from his contract and thus make him eligible for a $229 million extension. And as NBA contracts can include some raises, which is another thing, like raises of up to 8%, the final year of that possible extension would be the most of all of the deals that he could possibly get. And an older player risking decline might prefer to sign the contract, the $165 million contract right away from, like, just for security reasons. But remember that De'Aaron Fox is still only 26 years old and arguably in his prime right now. So his value is going to likely carry over at least one more year and probably a little bit more than that, and assuming that he doesn't suffer any big injuries that affect his legs. So he can feel relatively safe in waiting to secure the contract and waiting to get all of that money from the Kings. But if Fox is, like, not underrated this season, because in my opinion, De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis are the two most underrated players in the NBA right now, the fact that they did not one of them got selected for an all-star team is just ridiculous in my opinion. But he could probably be worth more than the $229 million, assuming he does not get underrated like he did last season, or if he plays significantly better than he did last season. If he makes an All-NBA or wins Defensive Player of the Year or MVP, but it's going to be unlikely for both of those in my opinion, he'll be eligible for a Supermax extension. So that's really, like, I think that's really what he's going to be going for. Winning a Defensive Player of the Year, like for De'Aaron Fox, it's not necessarily a, how should I say this, a favorite. Like, I don't expect De'Aaron Fox to win the Defensive Player of the Year. I think Victor is going to easily win the Defensive Player of the Year award this year. But MVP, depending on where the Sacramento Kings stand, if they're a high seed in the Western Conference, there is a very solid story behind De'Aaron Fox being the MVP of the league, because, I mean, they would have completely, if his production increases and as a result of his production increasing, the Kings are able to win more games, then that just means that, De'Aaron Fox's production is bringing the value that the team needs, and therefore would give him a good story for winning the MVP. Granted, that is still rather unlikely compared to some other players that are now favorites for winning the MVP, Jokic. But aside from that, or even SGA, who plays his position, he's going to have to vastly outplay SGA if he's going to want to get consideration for the MVP, which is a very difficult task. SGA is fantastic. One of the best mid-range scorers at the point guard position. I mean, his mid-range game is filthy. It is absolutely filthy. And again, as I said, this would allow him to add 5 new seasons to his existing contract next summer and guarantee him a ridiculous $345 million if he were to win the MVP. Like, that is a lot of money. That is way more money than what Jason Tatum is going to be making and what several other NBA players are also going to be making. And it would be the biggest contract in NBA history for now, obviously, because, a lot of players are going to want to make more than him, and they're going to pressure their team into making more than him. And though given the league's current economic climate, that record is likely to be broken pretty much every year for the foreseeable future. Like, this has been a trend ever since, like, teams have been signing supermaxes. I mean, Jaylen Brown, he signed the biggest contract in NBA history at like $304 million at one point, and then Jason Tatum went ahead and signed the biggest contract. Next, it's probably going to be Steph Curry. Next, it could be anyone really. I mean, the money and the amount of money that the NBA teams are making is just ridiculous, and I wouldn't be surprised if this $345 million extension ends up getting broken, but first it has to happen, obviously, so we have no idea if that's even going to happen. So the potential to become the highest paid player in NBA history is obviously going to be appealing for De'Aaron Fox, and in Fox's case, the patience does have the secondary benefit of allowing this season to play out. And the Kings expect to be a playoff team this season, but DeRozan is 35 years old, and the Kings got knocked out of the play-in tournament last season. So while finances are an obvious reason for De'Aaron Fox to wait on an extension, it never hurts to keep your options open just in case the Kings don't pan out the way that the Kings should pan out. And they made sorry for that. The Kings, they made the playoffs just once in the last 18 seasons, and that one season was ultimately cut short because Steph Curry said, I can hit threes, and had 52 points. And Fox, he's already one of the more well-paid point guards, and he's going to make a lot more in the very near future, assuming that his play could continue and he doesn't suffer any injuries. So waiting one more year, it's not going to be the death sentence for the Kings. Really, the way I see it, just focus on this season, focus on how the season plays out, depending on how it plays out. If it plays out good, then you have no worries for De'Aaron Fox. If it plays out bad, then that's when you should worry about De'Aaron Fox. So that's all that I really have on this second segment. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the third segment where I talk about the Lakers, and they're finally going to try to make a trade. They're finally going to make a move. It seems like it. So I'm going to talk about that right after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be talking about the Los Angeles Lakers and the possibilities of them pursuing a trade. I mean, finally, the Lakers are actually looking to make a move before the season starts. I mean, obviously, you could make the argument that it's a little bit late to try and make a move. But, still making one move is better than doing absolutely nothing considering the roster that they had. And I will say that, again, the only move that they made was the head coaching change and the coaching staff. But maybe I have a little bit of faith in J.J. Redick. Just a little bit. Anything, in my opinion, is better than Darvin Ham as your coach. And with J.J. Redick and how he has a much more modern approach to the game, I think he could bring a lot of good things for this team. However, it could always backfire, and some of the players just can't shoot the ball properly. That tends to be LeBron's case almost every single time. But that is besides the point. Again, for any of you guys who don't like LeBron, I said almost every single time. Doesn't happen every time, just almost every single time. But again, back on this trade, it seems that the Lakers are targeting a blockbuster trade for Charlotte Hornets star, quote unquote, that could immediately make them the championship favorites for this season. Obviously, the headline is very, very dramatic. This happens every single time that the Lakers make any move in the offseason. They thought that they were going to be title favorites once they got Russell Westbrook, and that turned out to be a total failure. Any sort of move that they think they can make is just immediately puts them in, championship success. And then when they struggle in the regular season, that's when somebody on the Lakers roster or somebody in the Lakers coaching staff gets scapegoated. And then once they get scapegoated, it fizzles into, the rest of the season. And then after All-Star break, they go on a little bit of a run. Then they get, rather excited for the possibility of being in the postseason. And then once they get into the postseason, they get wrecked by Denver. That is just the cycle of the Lakers. And that's been the case for the Lakers in the last 2 seasons, and aside from getting wrecked by Denver, it's been the case for the Lakers for a majority of the season, like a majority of the past seasons that they've had. Like, it's really, again, I understand this, though. I mean, you're always going to be a title favorite when you have LeBron James on your roster, but I mean, it's getting a little bit ridiculous now, in my opinion. So let's go ahead and see what the article's got to say. So The Lakers, as you guys know, they've remained very quiet in the offseason, despite speculation that they might target a big name to form a new trio alongside LeBron and Anthony Davis, which ended up not happening, of course, because they're the Lakers. And while rumors did swirl about, the team didn't make major additions. So they discussed that LeBron tried to bring Klay Thompson, but Thompson decided to join the Dallas Mavericks because he said, "Nah, I don't like you, LeBron," or something like that. That's not. Don't take that. Don't take that literally. That was just a joke because I have no idea what happened inside the walls of these sort of conversations. But really, I think to sum up a lot of it and to sum up most of the moves, I think some of these players, they don't want to play for LA, mainly because of the scrutiny that they might face when playing with LeBron. LeBron James's teammates, they get a lot of scrutiny for some things that might be out of their control, and if they play even a little bit worse than what they were to previously play, then the entire team, the entire franchise, and the entire fans would immediately turn on him. This happened with Westbrook, and I feel like all of the criticism that Westbrook got with all of the talents that he brings on the court, because again, I think the criticism was well deserved, but a lot of NBA players are probably going to look at that criticism like, goodness me, what happens if I were to play like that? What would they say about me? It brings a lot of pressure when trying to become a Laker, and not just playing with LeBron. It's a lot of pressure being a Laker, and it's really like, I think that, along with the fact that LeBron James is on the Lakers, is a reason why players don't want to play in a Lakers jersey. But that's just me. So, amid the Lakers' quiet offseason, Brett Seigel of Clutch Points, forgive me if I messed up that last name, has provided some sort of news for the fans. Now, he reported that the Lakers have expressed interest in several potential trade targets over the summer, and one name that has come up is the Charlotte Hornets center Nick Richards. Now, I know what all of you guys are thinking. Oh my God, who is Nick Richards? There's no way that this guy immediately turns them into a title favorite. And to that, I agree with you guys. There's no way that this guy could turn the Lakers around completely. Like, I think it's going to take a lot more than that, than just adding one center. Not to mention, I have no idea what kind of players or who they're going to have to give up in order to get him. And this is the quote that came in. The Lakers expressed interest in several possible trade targets during the summer. League sources confirmed to Clutch Points. One of the players that they expressed interest in was Nick Richards for the Charlotte Hornets, the report read. And Richards is coming off his best season, averaging 9.7 points and 8 rebounds. Hey, that's more points than Bronny, by the way. But as a young and rising talent, he could be valuable, and there is no guarantee on whether or not he might actually elevate his game when playing with LeBron and Anthony Davis. I wonder how the rotations are going to look, but I do think, like acquiring a young player that has potential is a rather good start. Like, anything is a good start when you did absolutely nothing, I guess you could say. So in hindsight, might be going a little bit easy on this, but the Lakers, they have completed 3 preseason games, securing just 1 victory, and despite the anticipation surrounding their preseason, the team has yet to play like any of these games in Crypto Arena. So, take that with a grain of salt. So, ESPN's Brian Windhorst explained the situation regarding the Lakers' home court. Right now, the Lakers can't use Crypto. There's a pretty heavy renovation going on there right now, especially outside of the building, if any of that is important to you guys. But that's sort of the reason why they haven't played at home in any of these games, and why they're sort of forced to go on the road for a lot of these preseason games. And due to these renovations, the Lakers played their first 2 preseason games in Acrisure Arena, in Palm Desert. And then they faced the Bucks in Fiserv Forum in Wisconsin, which led to some frustration from LeBron over on Twitter, or on X, formerly known as Twitter, And he was like, why do we have to go over to Milwaukee to play this game? He was already complaining about that. But back on the trade move, again, any move is better than nothing at this point for the Lakers. I don't expect them to make a huge jump compared to what was going on last season because of him. I expect them to make a huge jump because of the coaching changes and the overall the way that the offensive system is going to work with the Lakers now, and how the rotations are going to work with the Lakers. That's really something that I'm more interested in, and I feel like is going to bring much more of an impact to the Lakers as opposed to these sort of changes, right? So the reality is that these reports, they're just gassing it up, I guess you could say. And what does that mean? It just means they're over-exaggerating it by wide proportions, similar to how they over-exaggerated the Russell Westbrook deal. I want to be the first to say, like, I thought the Russell Westbrook deal on paper could end up working out, having LeBron James playing in the starting lineup and then having him sit out for a little bit because of his age, and having Russell Westbrook take up the ball and having Russell Westbrook be the ball dominant player that he is. However, Darvin Ham had no idea what he was doing. He completely forgot that Russell Westbrook can't shoot and would constantly put him in rotations with a bunch of centers that obstruct his path to the basket. And these lineups, they would not work for Russell Westbrook. However, I'm not going to sit here and say that Russell Westbrook played good enough for the Lakers. And I understand the whole rotation was a problem, but Russ was missing easy layups. Russ was making crucial mistakes that he always does. And I knew that eventually this move would end up backfiring for the Lakers because it's Russell Westbrook. And I don't mean to sound disrespectful, but Russ, yes, he does bring good, but he also brings a lot of bad with that good that I feel cancels out any of the good that he can bring. He's very, very inconsistent night in and night out, and you cannot have that if you are a team that is trying to compete for a championship. You need to have consistency. That is one of the most important things in creating a basketball lineup and creating a winning team. Without consistency, then there's no chance that you're going to win. And mainly offensive consistency. But if you do have the defensive consistency and you're constantly a great defensive team, that ultimately boosts your chances of winning a championship. Because again, if your offense doesn't really hold up the way it's supposed to, you have something to fall back on. This was a problem that I had with the Pacers, and a reason why the Pacers had several close playoff series, aside from the one that they got swept in, was because of their lack of defense. And if you need defense, you just absolutely need to have defense. It's way more than just offense that wins championships. I'm sure a lot of old heads are going to love that. Oh, defense wins championships, But that's all that I really have for this third segment. So now we're going to go ahead and go into our preseason recap of all the games that happened yesterday in the fourth segment. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be doing our preseason recap of all of the games that went down yesterday. I already talked about the 76ers game, a little bit when I was doing the Paul George segment, but I'm going to go ahead and, talk a little bit more about it again, just because, I didn't really talk about any of the key contributing players for this game. So again, this was the game that Paul George ended up getting injured, and it could trickle down into him getting injured for most of the regular season. We'll see how that goes. Again, not entirely sure exactly how that's going to work. But the 76ers, they ended up winning 104-89, an easy win, primarily due to Trae Young and giving them the ball, essentially. I mean, he turned the ball over a lot in this game. But for the 76ers, the leading scorer was Kelly Oubre Jr., and he ended up scoring 14 points. Obviously, everyone knows Kelly Oubre, but I have to put Jr. in that because, this isn't the first Kelly Oubre. I'm gonna Tyrese Maxey ended up also being the leading scorer for the 76ers, recorded 14 points and ended with 7 assists as well. Again, these starters, they should not be playing 26, 27 minutes in this game. They just should not. And we saw the problem with that with Paul George immediately getting injured after 12 minutes of playing. And, like, injuries, they are a big problem. And when they happen in the preseason, it could trickle down. I'm just throwing that out there for all of you 76ers fans. There was also KJ Martin, who came off the bench, 22 minutes, ended with 11 points. The 76ers, they shot decent enough from the field to end up winning. Again, a big reason why they won was because of Trae Young's turnovers. And Trae Young was not happy in the press conference with those turnovers that he got. And he ended up having 10 points. 9 assists as well, so pretty standard Trae Young performance, 4 for 12 from the field. Again, rather inefficient game from Trae Young, but this is sort of to be expected from Trae Young with the shots that he takes, and not only that, just his overall field goal percentage throughout his career. He's been rather inefficient recently. Now, other contributing players for the Atlanta Hawks, Zachary Rasacher, the number 1 pick in the draft. He ended up scoring 14 points and recorded 8 rebounds in this game. So far in this preseason, he's been very promising. So again, if everything can fall into place, he did go 5 for 11 from the field. However, he did shoot 1 of 5 from 3. So that's really going to be like the only thing that needs to be improved on for Zachary, his 3-point shooting. But again, so far he's showing a lot of promise for being a forward that is, I believe, 6'10", I want to say, maybe 6'9". Let me just go ahead and check his bio. Yeah, 6'9". So again, showing a lot of promise for the Atlanta Hawks and something that they can look back on. Now, next game that we're going to talk about is the Nets absolutely destroying the Washington Wizards. I predict that the Wizards are going to be the worst team in the NBA, period. They're going to be worse than the Pistons this season, in my opinion. And the leading scorer for the Brooklyn Nets was Cam Thomas, ended with 24 minutes, 17 points, and was also able to record 5 rebounds along with that. And guess what? Ben Simmons made an appearance in this game. Oh my God, he played in a game that doesn't matter. He had 11 points in 13 minutes. Oh my goodness, what a fantastic performance from Ben Simmons. 5 for 7 from the field, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. Just beautiful game from Ben Simmons. Everybody give him a round of applause. He was able to suit up for a game that didn't matter. And Dennis Schroeder ended up recording 13 points as well, ended up getting 7 assists along with that. And the lineup is going to be very interesting. If this is how they plan that their starting lineup to be, it is a little bit interesting how they're going with it. I mean, Dorian Finney-Smith was the power forward in this game, and considering that he's 6'7", that would put Ben Simmons at the center position, ironically enough. And again, Ben Simmons, he only played like 13 minutes. I guess, he got scared or something, but there was also Jalen Wilson that came off the bench, 14 points in 22 minutes, and Shake Milton, who ended with 16 points in 18 minutes. So overall, pretty solid production from everybody. And when Ben Simmons is scoring in double digits, it's an amazing game. Like, everyone's got to woo, like, throw the parade already. But on the Wizards side, however, they did not play so well, of course, because, I think they're going to be the worst team ever in the entire NBA. And Jordan Poole was the leading scorer. Of course he was. And of course he also ended with the second most shot attempts of anyone on the team. 13 points, 1 for 4 from 3, 5 for 11 from the field. Kyle Kuzma, however, was awful. I can't sugarcoat that. He wasn't very good. He missed every single three-pointer he took, and he took 6 of them. And he went 3 for 12 from the field for 7 points. Again, just bad. And I feel like this is sort of the expectation for the Wizards, and this is going to be a trend that's going to happen throughout the entirety of the regular season for the Wizards. I think they're going to just be awful. And despite, acquiring a rather competent center in Valanciunas, I don't think that's going to change anything. And Marvin Bagley III is also on this team as well, ended with 10 points. And again, just, average Wizards game. I don't expect much from the Wizards, and I don't think any of you guys should expect much either. Now, the Clippers, they matched up against the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks have yet to win a preseason game, and they still haven't won a preseason game. So, of course, this team is heavily reliant on Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, who didn't play in this game, which is the smart move. You should not play your two most important players, 76ers. They did play Klay Thompson, however, and he recorded 0 points, 0 for 9 from the field, 0 for 6 from 3. So all of the Klay Thompson jokes are going to be back at full force, going 0 for 9 in a game that doesn't matter. I don't think this is going to be the break of this season, obviously. I think, it's just a bad night for Klay Thompson, and it's normal. When you're a shooter, you're going to be hot, and when you're a shooter, there's times where you're not going to be hot. It's just that's just how it works. And the leading scorer for the Dallas Mavericks in this game was Jaden Hardy. Ended the game with 16 points. However, Quentin Grimes ended up scoring 20 points coming off of the bench for the Dallas Mavericks. And so that was really like the big highlight of the game and the best player for the Dallas Mavericks in this one. Next is the the Clippers. On the Clippers side, James Harden ended with 12 assists and 10 points. So solid performance coming in from James Harden. And let's see, he did shoot 3 for 12, however, from the field. He only took 2 free throws, which I think is a career low for James Harden. And he did shoot 2 for 6 from 3. And again, it's like, you can't really rely on James Harden to run an offense as you could when he was on Houston. So take that with a grain of salt if you are a Clippers fan going into this season without having Kawhi Leonard due to an injury. So it could be bad, it could be good, we'll have to see. But so far, James Harden has not shown any flashes of his days in Houston when he's on the Clippers. And Kevin Porter Jr. for the Clippers, yes, he's on the Clippers now. He actually ended up scoring 18 points, went 8 for 15 from the field, and was 1 for 3 from 3. So he was the leading scorer for the Clippers in this matchup. The Clippers were awful at shooting the 3-ball. They shot 27% from the field compared to the Dallas Mavericks' 37% from the field. But in the end, it didn't matter because their field goal percentage was almost 9% greater than the Dallas Mavericks' field goal percentage. So again, this was just an overall solid game from everybody on the Clippers aside from James Harden. And, I mean, I guess that's a good sign. Again, they beat the Dallas Mavericks without Klay Thompson or Kyrie. And not Klay Thompson. Well, technically without Klay Thompson, because Klay Thompson didn't do anything in this game aside from shooting up bricks. And they beat them without Kyrie, Luka Doncic, and Klay Thompson. So you can take that with a grain of salt. I don't really think that's going to change the trajectory on the Clippers. I just think that the Clippers are going to be a relatively mediocre team. They're not going to be the best team. It's all going to be dependent on how well James Harden can play. And given the recent history with James Harden, I don't think it's going to go that well. But next game on this list is the Grizzlies going up against the Pacers. Now, since the Grizzlies are smart, they did not play Ja Morant. Makes complete, total sense. Again, he did suffer an injury in one of the previous preseason games that they ended up playing. So that's probably a reason why he didn't suit up. But that's another player that's, in my opinion, should not have even been bothering and participating in the preseason games, because look at what happens now. Now he suffers another leg injury, which seems to be a common trend for Ja Morant. And the best player for the Grizzlies ended up being Desmond Bane. He recorded 23 points, actually almost was able to outscore the entire starting lineup. Again, almost was able to outscore them. I think it was almost. Let me just do some math real quick. Let's see. So that's 8. 8 plus 16 is 24, I think. Forgive me if I messed up that math. I'm not really good at math. Yes, it's 24. He almost outscored the entire starting roster for the Grizzlies. Almost. Just 1 point short. And Zach Edey had 23 points and 9 rebounds. Zach Edey could be one of the more a lot of people were expecting Zach Edey to be a little bit more like Boban in his career because of, just how tall he is and how short he is. But he's slow he is, excuse me. I said tall and short, that's my bad. But he's surprisingly rather quick on his feet for being a 7'4". He's not as quick as Victor Wembanyama, obviously, but he's still rather quick enough to move his feet. And again, you expect this from someone being so young. He went 10 for 15 from the field, and was super efficient. And I mean, obviously he should be super efficient. He's 7'4". He can dunk the ball rather easily, but this is good. This is some good news for Memphis. And would he be able to win Rookie of the Year? He could. He totally could. And Scottie Pippen Jr. was on the Grizzlies now, ended up going 3 for 10, 9 points. And for the Pacers side, the leading scorer for the Pacers ended up being Jarris Walker. And I don't think they're looking to play Halliburton at all in this game, which is really, or in any preseason game, which makes total sense. You should not bother in playing Tyrese Halliburton at all in the preseason. And again, he ended the game with 15 points. Benedict Mathurin, forgive me if I mess up that last name, 12 points, went 4 for 12 from the field. The Pacers as a whole and as a team, they did shoot better than the Grizzlies from 3, and they did shoot better from the field than the Grizzlies. But at the end of the day, the Grizzlies ultimately ended up prevailing, and I believe it was mainly because they ended up getting a lot more possessions than the Pacers to win the game. They had 92 possessions where they actually took a shot, compared to the Pacers' 79 possessions where they took a shot. So take that with a grain of salt, if you will. And next is the Bucks going up against the Chicago Bulls. Damian Lillard ended up scoring 20 points for them, and Giannis Antetokounmpo scored 24 points and 10 rebounds. So overall solid performance from all of those guys. And Giannis, he had 16 free throws in this game, and he made 12 of them, which is, very efficient and very good if you're Giannis. And the Chicago Bulls, they actually had, Adam Sanogo, the center for the Bulls, ended up recording 16 points and 15 rebounds, being the leading scorer for the Bulls. So overall, just a very solid game from both of these teams. The Bulls, they shot a lot of three-pointers. They shot a lot of three-pointers in this game. They shot 54 three-pointers in this game, and made 17 of them. Meanwhile, the Bucks ended up going 11 for 34, but they still ultimately prevailed. And it was really the difference in the win was the field goal percentage, 38% from the field, and compared to the Bucks is 43% from the field. So that's the recap of the preseason games. The preseason games that are going to happen today, there's a lot of them. The Knicks are matching up the Hornets. The Lakers are going to play the Warriors. Celtics are playing the Raptors. Spurs are going to play the Heat. Pelicans are going to play the Rockets. The Thunder are going to face off against the Nuggets. And the Kings are going to go up against the Jazz. So those are all the games that are going to happen for the rest of the day. Viral Reds in the chat. Keep it up, bro. Appreciate it, man. Thank you for the support. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the 5th segment, where I talk about some basketball news, just the overall basketball news that's going on. I want to fit it all into one segment. And the primary thing that I'm going to talk about is how there are now betting odds for which coach is going to get fired first. Yes, you heard that right. There are betting odds on figuring out which coach is going to get fired first this season, which I'm going to get into right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fifth segment, we're going to talk about some basketball news that's going on around in the NBA. And one of the biggest news is that I'm actually very surprised that I'm even talking about is now there's betting odds. Like, you can now bet on which NBA coach you think is going to get fired first, which is, I think that's the first time that they've ever had that odd in any of these betting sites. And I got this from SBE Hoops on Instagram. So if you guys are interested in that, if you guys really like basketball, I recommend following that. Following that user. They post a lot of news and, excuse me. But there's a list of these coaches that are, and their betting odds on who, on the most likely coach that is going to get fired. So, or get fired first, I should say. So right now at plus 400, the odds of getting fired are Billy Donovan, the head coach for the Chicago Bulls. And a lot of, I'm assuming, like, a lot of execs and a lot of people are predicting that he's going to be the first one to get fired. And I'm surprised that he's the first one. Actually, no, I'm not really that surprised. The Bulls, they've been mediocre with a roster that they thought was going to be a contending roster, but ultimately ended up fizzling out to be a mediocre mid-tier team. And Billy Donovan, not really that good of a resume that he's got. And I guess I'm not that surprised with him being one of the first coaches that are in consideration for getting fired. I'm actually more surprised that Doc Rivers isn't number one on this list because, you guys know how I feel about Doc Rivers. I think his coaching is just bad. And he's riding that one championship that he won with the Celtics as the big reason for his coaching resume. I'm sorry, but Doc Rivers, his adjustments are awful, his rotations are awful, his play calling is awful, and his timeout usage is also awful. Just not a good coach in my opinion. And he has 900 odds in being the first coach that fires. There's actually 3 more coaches aside from Billy Donovan that are ahead of Doc Rivers in getting fired. So Quinn Snyder for the Atlanta Hawks has a plus 700 odds in getting fired. And Chauncey Billups for the Portland Trailblazers has 600 odds for getting fired. And then Willie Green for the Pelicans ends up having 500 odds for getting fired. So all of those teams that I just mentioned are relatively, aside from the Blazers, they're mid-tier teams. And they have a roster that should be a good enough roster to contend in the playoffs, but ultimately they're just mid-tier. And whether it's the coaching that's holding them back, whether it's the mediocre players holding them back, that's a completely different story, and we'll have to see how it fizzles out. Now, Taylor Jenkins for the Grizzlies has 1,000 betting odds in getting fired. I don't really expect the coach for the Grizzlies to get fired this season. I think that they're going to have a very smooth season. I think that Zach Edey could be a good candidate for winning Rookie of the Year. And since they're going to have Ja Morant, hopefully, for a majority of the season, I think they're going to get back to being that winning team that we've seen Memphis be with Ja Morant under center. And Duke for PF in the chat, was good. Nothing much, just going over some basketball news, primarily how the betting odds are shaping up and who or what the betting sites think is going to be the first coach to end up getting fired. And I said it was Billy Donovan if you were just tuning in. So after Taylor Jenkins with the 1,000 odds, there is Will Hardy for the Utah Jazz, who ends up getting 1,200 odds, for getting fired. He's the coach for the Utah Jazz. Again, another mediocre team. And Mike Brown also on the hot seat for getting fired, at least according to these odds. And I don't really think Mike Brown is going to get fired this season. I don't know. I just don't think that's going to happen. And then directly below him are Michael Malone and Tyronn Lue. Again, I don't see Michael Malone getting fired, and I don't see Tyronn Lue getting fired at all this season. Tyronn Lue did take the Clippers to the only he didn't take them, but he led the Clippers without Kawhi Leonard to the only Western Conference Finals appearance that the Clippers have ever seen. So I don't think they're going to be quick to firing Tyronn Lue this season. And not only that, Michael Malone, while he while with Nikola Jokic, they have been unable to beat a team that has 50-plus wins in the postseason. I don't think this will be the season that they ultimately decide to just cut ties with Michael Malone. I think that both Tyronn Lue and Michael Malone's jobs are well secured. So those are the betting odds. Some other news that's been circulating around the NBA is that Lonzo Ball could be expected to return really close in this in the preseason. Now they're expecting to play him in a preseason game. Which preseason game he's going to play in is unknown still, but he is making a return to the Chicago Bulls and their lineup. And Lonzo Ball, I mean, I was a huge fan of him in college. Like him when he was playing in UCLA was absolutely fantastic. One of the best point guards that I've seen in college, despite the fact that he had this relatively funky jump shot. I thought he was going to be a very big talent in the NBA. Turns out his first few seasons with the Lakers were rather bust, but he slowly was able to find his way. And like when he was on the Pelicans after that trade with the Lakers, he developed into a very, very solid three-point shooter while still having the court vision and still having the defense needed at the point guard. Like he is a very solid defender at the point guard given his height as well. He is 6'7" after all, or 6'6". I forget exactly how tall he is, but he is a very tall guard. And him with the defense combined with his vision and his on the court, and now combined with his three-point shooting, that's a very solid point guard. And a lot of people and a lot of fans are very, very proud that Lonzo Ball has developed into a three-point shooter. Unlike certain guards that just refuse to fix anything and refuse to work on their jump shot, Ben Simmons, Lonzo Ball, he took the criticism like a man, and he changed his jump shot from what it was in college. You guys know that he shot the ball like this for some reason, practically blocking his face from even looking at the basket. Now he has like a relatively respectable shooting form, and because of that, he increased his three-point percentage from his rookie season to where it was, I think, maybe 32, maybe 37%, to around a 40% three-point shooter, which is staggering. Like, that is incredible improvement from Lonzo Ball. And he is literally proof that anyone can develop a jump shot if they work hard enough and they practice enough and they want to improve. So I don't want no excuse for Ben Simmons not being able to shoot. There is proof that you can develop a jump shot. There is proof. We have the coaches that can do that now. We have the coaches that know what they need to do. He just doesn't do it. So, no. No. Enough of the Ben Simmons slander. Excuse me for that. I cannot stand Ben Simmons and the lack of wanting to improve. But aside from that, some other news regarding basketball. The Kings seem to be looking to want to trade Jaden McDaniels to the Spurs in a move that is considered a salary dump. Now, what does that mean? It just means that they're trying to get rid of the player in order to increase their cap space for whatever it is that they want to do in the season. Now, it's just a regular salary dump. So they're going to ship Jaden McDaniels and his expiring $4.7 million contract to the Spurs. That's the look that what's going to happen. It seems like that's what's going to happen. And then the Spurs, they're only going to add McDaniels on their roster temporarily, as reports indicate that San Antonio plans on waiving him shortly after the trade becomes official. So his contract is going to count as dead money for their cap for the rest of the 2024-2025 season. It's also a very strategic play for the Spurs, who are likely going to be more focused on second-round pick, acquiring another asset to work with as they continue to rebuild and repurpose. And having Chris Paul to try and build up Victor Wembanyama to the center that a lot of people know that he's going to be is a very solid start for the Spurs. So those are all of the NBA news that I have set up, and let me know in the comments which coach you guys think is going to get fired first. But that's all that I have for this segment. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, So remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And as usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show. And if you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $sign below the chat box and you can send in your comments and donations that way. And it's guaranteed to get featured on the next show for any of you guys who are interested in doing that. And if Super Chat's not really your thing, that's totally fine. You could always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and you could send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or really helps the show. And thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.